Hello and welcome to the video. In today's video, we're going to be looking at some student survey responses for a recent survey we put out to students sitting the operational case study exam for February 2023. So if you are thinking of sitting the operational case study exam this May, there's going to be a really useful video for you because it's the most recent feedback we have from students who have recently sat the exam that you will be sitting very soon. And in this video, we're going to be looking at what they thought, what they thought was difficult, what went well, what they wish they'd spent more time on, what they wish they'd spent less time on, and one key tip for any future students sitting the exam. So if you are preparing to sit the case study exam soon, then this is a really useful video for you. So first of all, in the survey, we ask whether or not students are Astranti students or not. See, this is an Astranti video, and you can see that about 3/4 of the respondents did use Astranti study materials to prepare for the exam, but not everyone is an Astranti student, and about a quarter didn't use any Astranti materials. So it's a spectrum, a wider spectrum than simply our own students. And the first key question we ask is, how difficult do you find the exam compared to your expectations? So this is really about understanding how managing expectations. So how difficult do students expect the exam to be? And when they actually come to sit it, is it more, less, or as difficult as they think it's going to be? And you can see here that almost half found the exam about as difficult as they expected, which is really great because that means that expectations are being appropriately managed and people are going into the exam and facing a level of difficulty that they more or less had prepared for. A small number as well, around 10%, found the exam easier. So that's a great position to be in. It could mean that the exam ended up being easier, than you expected it, but it depends how difficult you expected the exam to be. If you thought it was going to be really, really difficult, really nearly impossible, then of course it's going to seem easier. Whereas if you thought the exam was going to be easy, of course it's going to end up being more difficult. And that's where we move on to this segment here of nearly a third of respondents found the exam more difficult than they expected. So in that case, they weren't adequately, their expectations weren't properly managed for how difficult this exam could be. And then again, as a small percentage of students said they found it much more difficult. So obviously these students really weren't prepared at all for how difficult the case study exams can be. And obviously that's not a nice position to be in. Really, you want to be in the position of as expected, or ideally easier than expectations. So another key question we ask is, what went well in your exam? And the responses range here. We get all sorts of different things. So I'll just pick out some of the key things that students said. Now, the person that said that everything went well, obviously they were very well prepared, and that's great that they were in that position. But things don't always go well, and we'll look at what didn't go well in a moment. But things like time management going well, that obviously helps a lot because it's one less thing to have to worry about. If you're getting through your questions and answers in the time that's being allocated, then you're going to feel good about what you're writing. Some people saying preparation for core questions. This person sat 5 mocks and felt prepared for all but one subtask. So that's really a good way to prepare, is if you sit the mock exams, and our Astranti mocks are written based on the topics that we think are going to come up in the actual exams, then by the time you come to the actual exams, you could be in this position where you're prepared for pretty much all the scenarios that are coming up. Another person corroborating that, they're saying the majority of questions I had expected to come up. So they possibly looked at the top 10 issues video and had an idea of what might come up in this exam. People practicing mock exams were well prepared, familiar topics, having done the mocks and the theory revision, going through the key theory on the syllabus to make sure that they are prepared. Making sure that they answered most of the questions thoroughly, and applying knowledge from the theory revision from Astranti combined with the mock exam papers. Again, kind of just adding to some of the key points that we've already seen there. But really being able to answer all of the questions in the time, with good time management and knowing the theory and applying the theory because you've revised effectively. Those are all, if those things go well for you, then you stand a good chance of passing the exam. So on the other side of the coin then, what could have gone better in the exam? Well, all sorts of things can go wrong, and that's what makes this exam difficult. It might for any two experiences, any two students, it might be completely different things that went wrong for them. But ultimately, if they go wrong, then you are worrying about whether you got enough marks to pass. So for some people, it's basically planning. So planning is a really key thing to do in this exam. It can really help give your answers structure and a flow that will be otherwise missing. Timekeeping is a difficult thing. It's a very time pressured exam. Even though it's 3 hours, that time goes very quickly and there is a lot that you need to do in that time. One student skipped one bit of theory and a question came up, massive time pressure. So that's the nightmare scenario, isn't it? You do all your revision and there's a huge syllabus that, you'll be learning as much as you can. And you see one topic and you think, okay, I'm going to skip that. What are the chances that this particular thing is going to come up in the exam? Well, unfortunately, that does happen. And if that does happen, you really are in an unfortunate position because you don't know what to write. You can't give a good answer and you really don't want to risk losing marks in this exam. You're going to have to sit it again and go through that whole process again. Again, someone here saying about theory, making sure you've revised all the theory really is important for doing well here. Analysing properly, not being able to analyse properly and write properly in the exam. So this person probably needed to do some more mock exams to get used to writing under time pressure. Clarity, more theory knowledge in some areas, could have written fuller answers with more time. So time management, really key thing to practice here. Less thinking, more writing. So that's one thing that planning really helps you with. You do a lot of your thinking up front in the plan and then you just give yourself lots of time to write. Someone got caught on a question they didn't really revise well enough for, so lots of similarity in the responses here. Someone not practicing the computer-based exam prior to the sitting, and in error only completed about 40% of the first task. So again, if you sit the mock exams, the interactive mock exams that we produce at Astranti, then obviously you'll be more familiar with the software and the platform. You're not going to make unfortunate mistakes like that. Another key question here, what would you have spent more time on in your preparation now that you have completed the exam? So in hindsight, what's something that you should have spent more time on? And this probably relates directly onto these, doesn't it? So anything that didn't go well, people should have spent more time on. So the top three here, time management practice. This is usually the top response. It's as I said, even though it's 3 hour long exam, it's really a lot that you have to cover in that time. And for the operational case study, you've got 4 different tasks. So you get 45 minutes, and that really, by the time you've read the question and identified the requirements and written your plan, by the time you started writing, you're probably down to 40, 35 minutes or so to write your response. So, time management, sitting mock exams is really going to help you. Second place, revision of theory. Again, particularly for the operational case study, theory is still a really important part of it. You have to demonstrate that you understand theory and apply it to the scenario that you're presented with in the exam. So making sure you know that theory and you can apply it is really important. And you can do that. The best way to practice that is by doing as many mock exams as you can get your hands on. Now, with Astranti, we do 7 mock exams that are written to the pre-scene. So by the time you've done all those, you'll be in a very strong position. But we recommend doing as many mock exams as you can get your hand on from whatever provider. Slightly lower scores here, but things that are still important. Answer planning, really a key sort of soft skill, a thing that you can easily deploy when it comes to sitting the exam that can really help with the structure of your answers and take some of the pressure off, because you do a lot of the hard thinking in the planning stage in that first 5 minutes or so. Typing speed practice, if you're particularly slower than average typist, that can help if you spend a bit of time, maybe once a week, an hour or so a week, trying to type a bit faster over the course length of 6 to 8 weeks. Then it might give you just a little bit more time, slightly more answers that you provide in the actual exam itself. On the flip side of this, what would you spend less time on in your preparation now that you've completed the exam? By far and away, and again, this is typically the same response time after time, the pre-scene analysis and the industry analysis. Now, the key takeaway here is not that these things aren't important. Analyzing the pre-scene is really important. If you don't analyze the pre-scene effectively and then you go into the exam, you're really going to struggle. So pre-scene analysis is actually really important, but it's not something you should spend all of your time on. You've got 6 weeks or so usually to prepare for the exam between the release of the pre-scene and the exam itself. Now, in that time, most of your pre-scene analysis should be complete within the first week, and that leaves you around about 5 more weeks to focus on other things like exam technique and theory revision, sitting mock exams. So pre-scene analysis is good, but you don't need to spend all of your time doing it. It's something you should be wrapping up within the first week or so. The same with the industry analysis. Showing broader understanding of the industry as presented in the pre-scene is going to give you better answers. It's going to show that you understand the wider industry and how the industry might impact the pre-scene company. But you really shouldn't be spending more than a day or so just doing a bit of wider reading through our industry pack perhaps, or watching the video. It's just there for a bit of context and background, but it's not something you should spend weeks and weeks on. As for everything else, a couple of responses, but what that implies to me is everything else is something that people spent the right amount of time on, or they certainly wouldn't cut any time that they spend on revising theory, mock exams, etc., etc. So finally, just wrapping up the video then, if you were going to give one tip for future students, what would it be? So the responses here vary, but it's things like always study well, keep studying hard, work towards your ambition, do as many mocks as they can. So really, you know, it's six weeks or so preparing, and that you've got to prepare for the exam. And really, if you want to pass first time and move on with your studies, move on to the next level and start your management level, then it is worth committing as much time as you can to preparing and studying for this exam, because it just puts you in such a strong position to pass. The pass rates for OCS aren't super low. They're kind of in the 65 to 70% region. So it's not a mega hard exam if you prepare for it. But if you don't prepare for it, then you really are going to struggle. So do as many mocks as you can. Make sure you get that theory revision in there, and don't be stuck in that situation where you've got to write an answer on a topic that you can't remember. Just keep typing. Technical understanding is useful only when you know how to use it and apply it. So that's really good advice. You've got to be able to apply these things to the scenario. Just demonstrating understanding and reciting theory isn't going to be enough. It's about how you apply that in practice. Do as many mocks as you can, study the theory, practice digesting the question well and quickly. You have to know the theory well. Is that point getting across to you now? Make sure you know the theory. Use a 15-minute introduction before the main exam starts to breathe and relax before the 3 hours of intensity. Again, a good point. If you do suffer from exam nerves and you feel really, really anxious going into it, you do get a 15-minute introduction. You can use that 15 minutes to kind of calm yourself down and get yourself in a good mental space to be able to perform well in this exam. Okay, so those are the results of the survey. So if you are sitting this exam soon and you are preparing to sit the case study, operational case study for the first time, or whether you're resitting, hopefully some of that feedback from the survey has been useful to you and is putting you in a good position to be one of the students that passes when you come to sit in May. Thank you for watching. I hope you found that useful, and remember to like and subscribe for more Astranti content.